All right, so I'm Gil Tippy. I'm a clinical psychologist, and I am one of the founders of the Rebecca School in New York City, the largest school in the world using the DIR floor time model exclusively. We have 120 kids, 120 staff. We're a vertical space, and I'll tell you more about school. It's really, I'm not here to sell anything because obviously you're not moving. Well, you might. There are people who move from a bunch of different countries and many different states to get to the Rebecca School. But I don't expect you to move. We're full. We have all the students that we need right now, and it's totally fine. I'm here really just to tell you about DIR floor time, about how it works with the Common Core standards, about what curriculum looks like for kids who are not making it but who could make it. And so I'm just going to share all that with you. I also want to say I'm one of the people who presents at this conference who does not have autism. I've never been diagnosed with autism. If anything, I'm just odd. And, I failed out of school. I didn't do well. I had a lot of problems. Teachers used to yell at me. I couldn't read or write. And I used to say to the teachers, don't get angry. I like you, and we could just be friends. But I'm not going to do the homework. And why don't we just enjoy what we have here, and we'll be together. And that's been my general attitude throughout my life. But I will not claim ever to have had autism, or I had some set of, stuff like everybody does. I'll also not claim to be twice exceptional, even though I am the clinical director of the Bright Not Broken Institute, in addition to being the clinical director of the Rebecca School. I'm really just exceptional, and you laugh, but everybody's exceptional, right? And every human being is exceptional, and everybody is someone who should have an education, should be a free and appropriate public education, and it should be appropriate to the way that you learn, and we should support people. So everyone is exceptional, and so I can say with confidence that I'm exceptional. Okay. I'm going to show you a picture of my friend Ray Leeper. The reason I'm showing you Ray is that Ray is the educational coordinator at the Rebecca School, and she provided a lot of the ideas that went into this PowerPoint. She's brilliant, hardworking, an excellent educator. We work in a very difficult educational atmosphere, a very behavioral educational atmosphere. The New York City Board of Education is a tough place with tough folks. Michael Bloomberg hired a whole set of lawyers just to conquer the Rebecca School, and we continue to exist, which is a good thing. We are in no way behavioral, but this is the great Ray Leeper. I learned early on that if you put a picture of Einstein up, you can say just about anything and say that Einstein said it. You will notice that that's sort of a meme on the internet, that if you say Einstein said it, people will listen to you. You always look smart. So I actually was able to find a picture of Einstein holding an Einstein marionette. That's really a real picture. It's not photoshopped. And he actually did say imagination is more important than knowledge. And that's what I think is at the center of a DIR floor time intervention. Imagination is, in fact, more important than knowledge. So I think it takes a certain amount of hubris to be an educator and to imagine that it is your job to put chunks of knowledge into people's heads, and that it is your job to constantly break things down and make them smaller and smaller and make up everything that a kid needs to know. It's absolutely absurd. And so I do think that fostering the imagination is more important than any group of facts that you could teach a kid. So I said I would never do a presentation about DIR floor time without showing a picture of Stanley Greenspan, the great Stanley Greenspan, who invented floor time. At the same time that Ivar Lovaas was inventing these behavioral interventions on the West Coast, Stanley went to Bethesda, Maryland as a young MD, ran into T. Barry Brazelton, and ran into Ani Bergman and all of the lefties who had to leave Europe because of the onset of World War II. And they all settled in New York and began to talk about children in a developmental way. So Stanley got to meet all of those folks, and he said, well, great, Ivar's a great man. Kids no longer are getting institutionalized. Let's work with them. But I don't think we have to work behaviorally. I think we can work developmentally. And so all he did was read his Piaget, and he came up with a developmental intervention that we use, and I'm going to talk a little bit about. I'm really sorry that Ron Kaufman is presenting up against this presentation, because I think the two presentations that I've seen that are going to talk about purely developmental ways of being with kids and purely ways which are purely following a child's lead are being presented simultaneously. So if you're in here, you got to go buy Ron's talk from Zen, and if those folks need to come and hear this, because floor time and sunrise are absolutely compatible ways of thinking about children. They think about children in very similar ways. Floor time is a little more assertive in terms of moving kids up the developmental ladder, but it is about joining kids where they are. This is the Rebecca School. That's me in an astronaut suit. I am the commander. I make people call me the commander, but only one day a year do I get to wear the suit. And there are people, it's obviously Halloween. We opened in 06. We have 115 kids. We're full, and we have a waiting list. We're dedicated to an entirely DIR curriculum, and that is no small statement, because we're developmental. We are purely developmental. We are not doing things like having kids memorize facts, point to things. We're not working behaviorally in any way. We are not using the PREMAC principle, which says you do this thing and I'll give you this thing as a reinforcer. None of those things. This is the book that I wrote with Stanley Greenspan. It is not in the bookstore, but you can buy it on Amazon. And it is about the school, and it's about the intervention. Stanley and I wrote the book. Stanley passed away, fortunately for us, right around the time the book was being published, because the title would not have been Respecting Autism. It would have been some very long and convoluted, ridiculous name. Stanley was a really tough guy, and he insisted on certain things, and it would have been a much more difficult name. But Respecting Autism is what it's about. We're about respecting kids, and we're about respecting the way people are in the world. The reason why I say it would have had a longer name is that this is the DIR model. It's the Developmental Individual Difference Relationship-Based Model. There you go. That is the worst single name in all of intervention. And Stanley insisted on it, and I say, Stanley, if you would just call it something like the love model or hugs, or come up with a better acronym, that went with hugs, people would do it, and people would understand that it was an intervention they could do with their kids, that it's not so tough, that it's not, you don't have to learn a million different rules. But by the way, these slides are part of the package that'll be up and available, so you can just have them. You don't need to write down what's on the slides. And if you want to email me, I will send you the slides, and I will send you whatever other materials you want. So please, you don't have to really, unless you like taking notes, and a lot of people learn that way, and that's fine. I said, Stanley, please just name it something else. He wouldn't, but it is easy to understand. It's a developmental model, like all developmental models. So you remember that you learned about Piaget. You can believe in your Piaget. It works just as well as Stanley's model. If you understand the sunrise, those early levels, just as good as Stanley's model. If you understand any other developmentalist, that's fine. That's exactly the way you should think. First a kid does this, then a kid does that, then a kid does that, and then a kid does that. That's all a developmental model means. Human beings develop. They just do. So it's a developmental model. The I is individual differences. You and I have things that are different about us. You might like a noisy cocktail party. I might find it really difficult and overwhelming. You might like the symphony. I might fall asleep. We all have differences. If it were up to me, being a New Yorker, I would have been the shortstop for the New York Yankees for the last 17 years. The sad truth is, there was a guy there already. He seems to be able to go, or he used to when he was younger. He used to be able to go to his right a little bit better than I can. He would turn and make a throw. He certainly could hit better than I can, or better than most people in Major League history. But the truth is, if everybody were the same, that would have been the job that I would have fought for. Now, I always tell people that I think that I do some things better than Derek Jeter. People who know me say that's not true. I do absolutely nothing better than Derek Jeter, and there might be some truth to that. But we all have differences. Why not pay attention to our kids' differences? And we know that our kids have processing differences that are even more extreme. This is really just the occupational therapy literature for the last 30 years. And so all Stanley did was look at his Piaget, talk about developmental, look at the occupational therapy literature, and take that whole into the model. Pay attention to the way kids are processing and the way they learn and the way they are in the world. Just pay attention to those things. And the last piece is relationship. Human beings develop in relationship. You are born premature. There's a word for that which I now forget. But we're not gazelles. We are not born, we don't jump up and start eating grass and run away from lions. We have to develop in our mommy's and daddy's arms. That's just the way it works. And you borrow from your mommy, usually, some of her ability to organize the world. So people develop in relationships. And to ignore the importance of this incredible parental relationship and to ignore the need to be in a deep and loving and connected relationship with a kid is to deny all of human evolution and human history. This is not a model that came about last week, right? This didn't come up in the 1960s because somebody could make a pigeon spin around, right? This didn't just suddenly appear. This is 100,000 years of human history. So this is how human beings get treated and have always been treated. So let's talk about the developmental piece real quickly. These are Stanley's ideas, Stanley Greenspan's ideas. Use whatever ideas you want to. It doesn't really matter. But this is Stanley's idea, and so that's what I'm going to present to you. The first thing that kids have to do is they have to stay calm and regulated, and kids do that in 0 to 3 months. Up until 3 months, kids are pretty unregulated. They really need to be soothed all the time. Nobody sleeps in the house of a newborn. It's just the rule. But we know some of our kids aren't there yet. Some of our kids are not regulated. Some of our kids are not able to be present. Some of our kids are not able to be calm. So we pay attention to this. So you have to be calm before you can do anything else and available. Now, shared attention, by the way, does not mean I point to this and you look at it. That's not shared attention. Shared attention is for somebody to have something really cool. Babies do this, and we all do this. I have this really cool thing. And then you want to share that with somebody else. And you look at mommy and you say, look, mommy, this really cool thing. And you're like, yes, it's really cool. That's cool. We love it. We go back and forth, right? That's what shared attention is. And that's where some of our kids are challenged, right? They don't have the ability to say, I have this really cool thing. Let me share it with you. The second thing that happens to you is you become engaged, really engaged and available and bright. And we all know that. Those of us who have neurotypical kids in addition to having kids with challenges know that when a kid is sort of sitting in the high chair or in the bumbo and is sort of just available to you and you're looking and you're back and forth and you've got that gleam in the eye and the same thing that we're doing right now, I have this same engagement with you guys because I can see you, I connect with you. And the truth is when I look out, I feel the little connection from each of you, even if you're not nodding at me. That's what we're talking about, to be engaged and related. The next thing the kids have to do, and they usually get there fairly early, is be able to communicate and offer and open and close circles. I look at you, you nod, you gesture, I agree, we talk if it becomes language, but that's what we need to do. And that's where I think almost any intervention can get to. I think most interventions are aimed at this functional, emotional, developmental capacity 3. They want kids to be able to do some simple things, point to things, ask for things, request things. There are interventions entirely based on demanding things. They make up funny vocabulary for it, but it's really just I want kids to be able to request things is the entire intervention. And any intervention that's done by good-hearted, sincere people who are really trying to be connected, you know, the really nice young therapists who have come to your house who get great results, doesn't matter what they're doing because kid loves them. Those people can get a kid to functional, emotional, developmental capacity 3. And I think any intervention, almost any intervention, except for some of the ones that we know are sort of exploitative and hogwash, most interventions done by sincere people can get to functional emotional developmental capacity 3. The problem is most interventions get stuck there because once you demand stuff, once you use your good memory, once you're able to point to things, once you can ask for what you want, cereal and simple things, take your mom's hand to the door to let her know you want to go outside, tantrum when you're doing something wrong, when mommy's doing something wrong, not when you're doing something wrong, tantrum when mommy's doing something wrong, that's just not enough. It's not enough to be the free agent in the world that we would all like to be and that we would all want our children to be. So that's not enough. So this is where I think DIR floor time is great, because to be able to get to functional emotional developmental capacity 4, where you can problem solve in a nice co-regulated flow. You're thinking about me, I'm thinking about you, I'm watching you be too emotionally high, so I'm lowering my intervention. You're watching me get angry, and then you're like, whoa, 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 calm down. That's this little co-regulated flow. In a continuous flow, 50 or 60 circles, that's what you need to do to be able to handle a lot of the world. It's not sufficient, but it is necessary. And I don't think most interventions get this continuous flow between two human beings, because that's not their goal. Their goal is not to do that. Their goal is to add memory items, things that you need to know factually, things that exist directly in front of you. But it isn't to get into a flow with another human being. It really is very difficult to do that if you are also have a clipboard in front of you and you're checking stuff off, or you're moving tokens from one side of a board to another. Very difficult. So I think this is necessary. And the next thing is the creative and meaningful use of ideas and words. That's abstraction. That's the ability at 18 months to begin to understand that the cat is on top of the bookcase, and that matters, that you can communicate that, or that you have a feeling inside of you that you're attempting to communicate. Things that are around in the world, and if you can get to that level, pretty much you don't need any special intervention in a school. Pretty much you can function in a typical classroom and be totally fine. The next level, building logical bridges, is the level that we expect every nursery school kid in this country to get to before they go. Now, I want to just say parenthetically, it used to be first grade that you had to be there. When I was a kid, you didn't have to be at functional emotional developmental capacity 6 until first grade, because you didn't have to learn to read until first grade, and you didn't have to sit and read off a board and do all the things, because surprisingly, kindergarten, children's garden, right, was about playing with your friends and learning how to do social back and forth in a continuous flow. Playground politics, arguing about who was going to be up and who was going to be down on the teeter-totter, which probably don't exist also in play yards anymore, because they are too dangerous and kids, hurt their fingers. But now it has moved down through kindergarten, and it has moved into nursery school. So it's expected that a 48-month-old child will be at functional emotional developmental capacity 6. Well, what happens to those of us, and I think I might have been in this category, but I was lucky enough not to have experienced this. What happens to those of us who are having some processing challenges and who might not have been able to do that curriculum, who might not have been able to read at 4 years old, who might not have been able to sit calmly in a seat and follow the rules and line up the way that I needed to? I can tell you for one thing, I would not have lined up. That I would not have done. I was charming, but I was not going to line up. People loved me, but anyway, so if you get to that level, that's the level of the standard USAAA curriculum, and for most of the world also, for most of the industrialized world also. These last 3 levels I don't really worry about. I don't function at them very often. Gray area thinking, it's very hard for me to think sometimes I like this person and sometimes I don't like this person. They're nice sometimes and not nice sometimes, although I have to tell you that the kids we work with at the Rebecca School get there, where they can say, I don't like him on the playground, he's too rough, but I do like him in the classroom, and I'll spend some time with him. That's pretty sophisticated thinking. The multi-causal comparative thinking, there's many different causes for something, and reflective thinking with a sense of self and internal standard. Gee, I had a fight with my partner this morning and I blew up, and that was really more about the fact that I was nervous about this presentation and, I better call and apologize. Since very rarely do I function at that level, and I don't think our national political system functions at that level particularly well, I choose to ignore it. You don't really need it. Clearly you don't need it. It's nice, though. It's nice when you run into those people. I am presenting at the Mind Life Institute in Boston, and the Dalai Lama is going to be there. So that's why I put in a paper for there, because I wanted to. I have met the Dalai Lama before, so I got that going for me. That's a Caddyshack reference for all of you. But I would think he probably functions at level 9 pretty effectively. Individual differences in the DIR model, it isn't just fine motor, not just fine motor. So if all kids are getting our handwriting or pincher graspy kind of things, in my opinion, you need to have the gross motor stuff going on as well, because you need to be able to map your body. If you can't map your body, you can't map the space. If you can't map the space, you're going to have problems developing abstraction. Remember I told you at 18 months you need to be able to say on top of, around, behind. Kids very often lose language at 18 months because they've developed the memory piece of language, and then they have trouble developing the abstract piece of language. And so they begin to lose the meaning behind, why do I need language? But the funny thing is, if you move kids up developmentally, those kids who lost language, we find this again and again at the Rebecca School, boom, all of a sudden they talk, and everybody says, well, where did that come from? Well, he was talking before. He was talking at 15 months. He can talk. It's not like the talking is broken, but the reasoning, the understanding of why I would want to do that is gone. Auditory and language processing, expressive and receptive, those are words from speech and language pathologists. I prefer to talk about this in terms of being able to communicate, that's what they're calling expressive, and being able to understand. Because that opens it up to a million different ways of communicating, not just language. Now, every speech and language pathologist I've ever talked to, if you say, what's the number one thing that parents want? They always say, I want my child to talk. And then if you ask them, they say, I want my child, what do you want them to say? They always say, I want them to say, I love you. But you aren't going to get that emotional piece where the child is the poet of his inner life and can communicate those deep things purely behaviorally. There has to be an intervention where you take a child's basic wants and needs, try to understand them, join them in it, and bring them into it. And I could talk more about visual spatial processing, but that is an area that often gets ignored. We're talking about developmental optometrists and ophthalmologists and good visual spatial work, and sensory modulation processing, obviously, we work on all the time. I'm speeding because this is a 50-minute presentation, and like all of the people who show up at this conferences, we are gaseous windbags. And we would infinitely prefer to talk about this for 4.5 hours. So what I will normally speak about for 4.5 hours, I will speak in 50 minutes. Let me just tell you that if you wanted to see more about this, there are lots of websites which I will refer you to, which will be very useful to you, including hours and hours of me talking, trying to be funny and charming, but at least you can see it at a slower pace and see it in more depth, and I will refer you to all those places. We're a relationship-based model, and that's everybody. We firmly believe at the school that everybody is going to work within the relationship, that we support caregivers, we bring parents in for training and coaching with their kids live in the school. We will train siblings. We run sibling support groups. We run parent support groups. If you have an applied behavior analytic interventionist who's working 35 hours a week with your kid in the home, we'll train her too if she wants to come in. We'll train anybody. We've had grandmas and grandfathers in. We see ourselves as a community resource. It is really important to us to be givers. We think of ourselves as bakers, not eaters, right? If you're an eater in this autism world, you are trying to defend the copyright around what you do, and you're trying to make sure that people have to buy it only from you. If you're a baker, you just say, look, this is available. It's easy. Let us show you. Here's a gift. Take it. So I will refer you to the websites where you can get all of this for free. The truth is, you already know how to do it. Being mommies, daddies, grandmothers, grandfathers, siblings, you were already doing it. That group last night, if you didn't get to see them talk last night, each one of those people was already doing it, and they were the siblings. Their deep devotion, their understanding of their sib, it was inspiring. It was really lovely. A little overwhelming. I see my friend Christopher Gauthier back in the back, and Chris and I were sitting together, and it was a little overwhelming because it's very powerful and touching. Okay, so we train everybody. So I think the symbolism is really important in this, and I think it is very important that kids understand that one thing can stand for another thing. Because as an educator, I'm a clinical psychologist, but I'm also an educator. I was a teacher, and now I run a school. And I teach in education departments, and I do a bunch of other junk like that. But it boils down to this. All of education is one thing can stand for another thing, right? That's what symbolism is. So all of language is symbolism. Language is symbolic. This stands for that. Totally made up. Reading is symbolic. This symbol stands for that. And it will always stand for that. Whether it is a Times New Roman D or a small d in another font, it stands for the same thing. And directionality matters. So if it's facing this way, it's a small d. If it's facing this way, it's a small b. You have to understand those things. Totally 100% symbolic. Where you stand in line when you're lining up is your teacher teaching you the order of the planets and the motion of planets around the sun. So go stand up according to height order. Later on, when you get to 9th grade and you need to understand earth science, all of a sudden you are able to understand that the crust of the earth has different layers. But it all starts with understanding that where you are actually matters, that it's symbolic. One thing can stand for another thing is all of important curriculum. It is how, when we shifted from No Child Left Behind to the Common Core Standards, it is the basics of the Common Core Standards. Now, I understand that some states do not wish to do the Common Core Standards. That I don't actually, being somewhat liberal myself, I don't actually believe it's a liberal plot. I do think, in fact, that it is good, solid education. And it is how we were educating kids before we decided that the way to educate them was to make them regurgitate facts, learn to cheat, and begin to get so anxious that they couldn't sit in classrooms anymore. So, that being said, if you want to know more about this, I have a set of lectures on my WordPress account called Tippy Has a Simple Mind. People have told me that that has a pejorative meaning. I suppose that is true. I do have a simple mind, but it explains what I mean by this and what the curriculum actually is. And they're only little, like, 6-minute videos, and there's 4 of them, and if you watch them, they're free. None of this is for pay. And just watch them, and then you will understand better what I mean by symbolism being the very core of the curriculum. The Common Core Standards now ask kids to make inferences. Our kids have challenges in that. They ask our kids to pick out the central idea or theme of a text, or why individuals, these are from New York State Common Core Standards, they are different across the states, but they have the basic ideas behind them. Kids have to figure out why people do things. Can you think of how challenged the person with autism or with challenges that you know would be answering that question? They ask you to assess another person's point of view or the author's point of view in order to pass the Common Core. Imagine what that's like. I mean, I have trouble understanding what people's points of view are because I'm right about everything. So I would have trouble with that. You have to compare approaches, not some set of words or how often this occurs as a word in a piece. The approach the author used. And you have to be able to tell stories in order to figure out what their central message, lesson, or moral is. That is fairly sophisticated thinking. So I actually find that to be somewhat challenging. I'm going to skip over the next slide because we have other stuff to do. So what do I do on Monday in a school? So we have to develop a curriculum that is a thinking-based curriculum for kids. And we want kids to be able to think about other people and be flexible with that, because that's the social skill everybody is asking for, right? You know, people are saying, I want a social skills group. What they really want is that their kid would be able to think about what the other kid is doing. We have to be able to support kids where they're actually at risk. This is Ray's slide. I'm not going to take credit for it because I think the font is too small. The rule for presentations is pick the oldest person in the room. So I'm in line for that. Divide their age by 2. That's the smallest font you can use. I actually think this is too small. But so let's think about the kids. Actually think about them when we develop the curriculum. Let's not make up something on the state level and perpetrate it. Or I just came back from a school in Canada on a national level. They have a national curriculum that you have to follow when you are working with kids on the spectrum. So let's not do that. Let's think about the kid who's sitting directly in front of me and change the way that I teach in a not traditional way. I know that is what Jennifer O'Toole will be talking about. She will talk about how you can change curriculum in order to actually meet our kids' needs. And we want to foster growth in kids. It's not enough just to pound information at them. They have to grow. Kids early at those developmental stages need a curriculum that's going to help them stay regulated. You know, parents say to me all the time, my kid came to your school, I want them to continue to do addition and subtraction and multiplication, because that's what they were doing. They weren't able to sit in a chair, they were biting people, they had all kinds of other challenges, but I want those things to continue. And I always tell them, Mom, Dad, your dream and my dream are the same dream. I want your kids to go on and excel and to be doing analytic kinds of mathematics. I want them to do calculus, but the pieces that they're missing are the curriculum that happened for most of the kids before they got to school. That for some reason, we don't know. A lot of the people who will present here will tell you ideas about why, but for some reason, those kids did not get to the point where they could sit calmly in a classroom and go back and forth with others, and were able to do all the things that we just assumed would be in place when they showed up in nursery school. And so before we do these other things, we are also going to do these things. And that is the curriculum, but it's the secret curriculum that happened before your kid got to school. So we pay attention to that. So early on, kids have to be in smaller groups. We are not a cubby school. Kids are in typical classrooms with lots of other peers. Things are loud like your typical classroom would be. And sometimes it is a challenge to bring in kids who have never been in that situation, who have always been in one-on-ones and have had very direct intervention. But we do it because we want kids to get in the flow. But early on, in early stages, kids have more one-on-one attention, and over time you can grab kids and link them together and get them in this social interaction that everybody wants. So as you can imagine, as kids go higher, I want to show you videos, so I'm going to skip through slides. As kids go higher, we end up going higher and higher with them and putting them in larger and larger groups. Our reading program is to create a community amongst the kids, because after all, when you read stories with kids, they become the common language for certain kids, right? You have all read the news reports about the father who taught his kid to be in an interaction through the Disney stuff, with very big news. It's all over the media. The guy has now gotten a lot of money to do research. I was just interviewed by the Radio Lab radio program, for those of you who listen to National Public Radio. I was just interviewed by Radio Lab, and they're doing a thing on autism, and it'll be me and that dad and the kid, interestingly enough, and the sibling of the kid, so he can talk about his experience. But that's what the father did. He took this and made it the communal language. He said, my kid loves this, I'm going to go there. I think the mistake is to imagine that Disney is somehow the magical intervention. This kid happened to love Disney, and dad loved his kid and wanted to talk with his kid, and that's how they got in it. And that's what I think is going on. But anyways, so that's what we want. We want a common language, and that's what we found as we did it. We decided on a fairy tale curriculum, and the reason why we decided on a fairy tale curriculum is because it's like baseball, right? Baseball evolved so that it sort of fit human beings. It wasn't a set of rules that were just made up. They sort of evolved over time, and now it takes the same amount of time to throw a ball from a pitcher to the catcher and then back out to second base as it takes a fast guy to run from first base to second base. But that didn't just happen. It evolved, and they played with it. That's why fairy tales are great. They came through human psyche. They're filled with lots of cool emotions. That's why Disney likes to use them. They have a lot of death and scariness and wonderfulness, and that's why we use them. You need to have high affect, lots of emotional ideas, lots of repetition, and get kids to go back and forth and have some fun. They have to be fun and have meaning and be relevant. They can't just be nonsensical. And when things don't work, have a second plan ready. That's the way our curriculum works. So I want to just show you, I'm going to skip these videos and we're going to go on. I want to show you a little bit of something that you need to also pay attention to. Stephen Shore, who everybody loves and admires, talked a lot about music therapy and talked about how that language was important. So our classrooms, because we are these language-bound people, are run with real attention to spoken language. And some of our kids are challenged beyond belief by spoken language. For the most part, their understanding is better than their ability to communicate, but sometimes we have had kids who really were challenged in understanding. And, the DIR floor time model talks about how you need to get somebody at level 4 in a continuous flow, a back and forth continuous flow. Well, if you're really, really language-based, you're challenged. If you are going to use a picture exchange communication system, for instance, you already have to be higher than level 4 to really deeply understand that these symbolic pictures mean a particular thing. You might graphically be able to memorize it. Oh, that is the thing which brings me popcorn, because you remember the picture and you've taken a picture in your head. But to translate that into, oh, this is standing for that delicious, buttery thing, is very, very difficult. So early on we brought in improvisational, interactive music therapists. These are not drop a needle on a record music therapists. These are folks who are trained in a model called the Nordhoff-Robbins model, which I could explain to you, but which you can look up on your own, which is a national model, a national certification standard of improvisational music therapy. And in order to begin to talk to kids who we found were having challenges that we could not surmount with our inadequate language-based therapies, right? So this little girl that I'm going to show you, and we have permission to show all these videos. This little girl I worked with, and the best that I ever got from her was a sort of a little communication where she would run up to me and then turn and run away. And we did that a lot. But my language meant nothing to her. She was delightful. She would stick her head in the corner in the lobby and lie on the floor in the lobby as activities were going on around her. And another brilliant floor time therapist who I know would lie with her and try to engage her and get her back and forth. But because things were so overwhelming, she could not do it. We tried all different people, and then we got we got a new music therapist who classically trained in all the conservatories, a brilliant musician, and we said, okay, Kenji, here's this beautiful little girl, see if you can help out here. So I'm going to get out of my PowerPoint, and I'm going to show 4 videos of this little girl. So this little girl really had language processing difficulties, and she was lovely, but would not speak. Would not speak. We weren't sure she could speak. Okay. All right, now this looks blank to you, so I have to, they told me how to do this. There it is. Okay. All right, this will be the first session. Okay, so she enters the room. She does not own a piano at home. They have never given her music lessons. She came for the very first session with Kenji, and she walked in the room, and did this never show up there? Okay. Hold on, I'm gonna drag it. I have to put this down. They promised me this would work, but it's not working. Ah, there we go. Okay. Okay, and so this is what happened. Okay, so some of you might be musicians. So do you know what she's playing? Because I didn't. But Kenji, who used to practice 8 hours a day, did know what she was playing. So this is what she was playing. Okay, so you discover that that's going on, and you say to yourself, well, that's phenomenal, but now what do I do, right? So this is what you do if you're a DIR floor timer. Now, if you're not a DIR floor timer and you discover a kid like this, you might write a book about her, and then you might get famous, and then you would teach her to do more music, and she would become a famous pianist, and she would be really good at stuff, but then she would still have trouble. But that wasn't enough, and Kenji was sort of said, I don't want her only to be able to do this. I want her to be able to do other stuff. We have to think about this. Right, they've confused me on how to get rid of this. And maybe if I go up to the top. Oh, there it is. Oh, can you see that I'm getting it? Did I get it? I got it. I'm so happy. So nobody wrote a book about her, and nobody got famous because she came to exist at our school. This is later in that same session. Okay. Have to do the same thing again, don't I? Okay, so now what do you do with a kid who wants to talk to you and you finally figure out what her language is, right? You don't just play like a machine, which she wanted him to do. She constantly wanted him to play more and more and more for her. So she would insists that he do stuff. And so we talked long and hard about this. What do you do with a kid like this? And what you do is you use her beautiful interest as a way to move her developmentally. So this is what he did later on. This is the entertainer that she's hunting and pecking for. Ragtime, not easy. I assure you that he could play this, but that he is stopping because he's saying, oh, no, 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 no. I'm not a machine. I'm not here for your entertainment. We're in this together. This is a conversation. Because the notion is, I want you to understand what language is for. Why would you bother to talk if you don't know what language is for? So I'm going to teach you in this way of talking what language is for. And it's to mediate the space between you and me, and it's to talk about your inner life. So she wanted to play the William Tell Overture because he challenged her. You've got to stay in a flow with me. Even though it was something she liked, to stay in a flow with somebody is a challenge, right? We know that it's a challenge for our kids, but he said, no, we're going to stay in this because conversations have beginnings and middles and ends. She's brilliant, right? And he's a brilliant therapist because he will not allow her to just run away from him. Okay, so look, this is what it's about. Opening and closing with kids, finding out what they're interested in, helping them develop their leads. I want you to know that he worked with her for 6 months. He worked with her for 6 months and then he stopped seeing her. Because we could have done this forever. It was fun for us. But she began to talk in the classroom. She began to be part of the classroom because she understood, oh, that's what this is for. And she's now not getting any music therapy from us because our resources are now spent on other kids. But this kid now is involved in the classroom, back and forth, opening and closing circles. Let me just show you one last thing, and then I will put up a slide which will show you all the things you can write down. It will end right on time. Bye. supervised that. I said, you gave her too much for too little. Yes, I think that's I will tell him and her you appreciated it. Okay, so that's it for me. I'm going to just put up a slide where you can get stuff if you want it. And please feel free to email me. Go to Dr. Tippy, giltippy.com. There's no pay, nothing on there. I link to a lot of cool folks with autism who have really interesting and cool lives. Call me on the phone if you want to talk to me. I'm fine with that. Now we know each other. So now I'll help you out. And I'm sincere about that.
Where is the school? Is it in Manhattan?
Yeah, it's in Manhattan, 40 East 30th Street. We're between Madison and Park. Very Tony section now, but when we bought it, it was a very dangerous section. But now that Mario Battaglia put in Italy in there, it's all of a sudden it's a very happening place. But please come and visit. I'm totally sincere. Thank you very much.
Thank you.